Well, welcome to tonight's live stream, which, even though it has our newly updated logo, which I thought was pretty cool and I wanted to share with you on the opening screen, it doesn't really have any connection to investigations and ritual abuse other than the fact that I might loosely touch on um, some of the issues involved in ritual abuse. Shout out to PBR for making a delicious non alcoholic beer. So, tonight's relevant question, and I was having this discussion with my wife earlier, is why America has more guns than people. I remember having a conversation with two foreign students in law school about this very issue. And my take on it is very simple. Whenever I talk to somebody who's foreign who just does not understand American gun culture and why Americans have so many guns. I myself have owned or possessed over 98 guns over the course of my life. I enjoy the shit out of guns. Um, Before, my health got to the point where it currently is, and I was having to I've had to spend all of my money on on pills and treatment and staying alive. I went to the gun range quite regularly. I spent a fortune on ammunition every month. Shooting was how I decompressed. But to get straight to the point, the reason Americans have so many guns, and this is what I tell foreign people when they ask about American gun culture, is have you seen our government? Have you fucking seen our government? Like, if you had our government, wouldn't you want a bunch of damn guns? Like, our government is psychotic. I mean, you have no further need for proof other than looking at our foreign policy and looking at what our government has done in our name over the course of my short 48 years on this earth. I can't count the number of times our government has intervened abroad militarily, stuck its nose where it didn't belong, for whatever reason. And what our government is very good at doing is directing our attention towards its aggression externally. But the uncomfortable implication, and this is what cognizant Americans or conscious Americans are aware of, is what happens when they start directing that attention inward. What happens when they start, instead of going on foreign misadventures abroad, they start bringing all that aggression back home. And they start directing it at citizens. You already see that in a militarized police force. You see the police over the last 26 years or so. Well, 25 since 9/11. You see the police getting military surplus equipment. You see a lot of policemen who ultimately shouldn't be police officers at all because they think they're Rambo. And the reality of it is, um, Americans no longer believe that the police are there to protect and serve them. Americans no longer believe in their government. Congress, on a good day, has a 16% approval rating. Our current orange idiot of a president, he has an approval rating in the 20s. What the government is very good at doing is getting people riled up to support justified foreign intervention, which is justified to go after Osama bin Laden on 9/11, based on what we knew. Like we've all seen that video of Osama bin Laden purportedly professing responsibility for the bombing of the Twin Towers, and the Pentagon, and of course what happened in terms of crashing that flight in a field in Pennsylvania. We've all seen that. Whether or not it's true, well, at the time we thought it was because we still were naive enough to trust our government on some level. We thought that there were things that our government would lie to us about. And what we've come to realize over the course of my adult life, from the time I was 23 on, is that our government lies about everything. Our government is comprised of pieces of shit, 4 pieces of shit. And as I've said in the Unfucking America series that I've been doing, we're 2 episodes in. There's all of our problems are condensed down to maybe, 5 to 10% of the population. 1% of the population commits over 60% of the violent crimes. They're just constantly committing violent crimes. And what does our government do? They turn them loose, put them back into the general population of law-abiding citizens. I mean, we've all seen video after video of the end result of this. We've seen that girl in, I believe it was South Carolina, Ukrainian refugee, just stabbed in the neck and killed for no damn reason by a guy who should have never been on the street to begin with. But our government did that. Our government, with this current misadventure in Iran, not only are you feeling it at the gas pump now, but in about 6 to 12 months, you're going to be feeling it a lot worse, because that's when the real oil supply shock is going to hit. Because we haven't had any ships for close to 2 months through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the biggest oil export hubs in the world. And what people don't realize is those tankers move between 10 and 12 miles an hour. So you haven't begun to feel what that supply shock is going to be 6 months to a year from now. Those are just facts. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever flavor of the political spectrum you have deluded yourself into thinking you belong to, you're all going to feel it. You're going to feel supply shocks in oil in terms of like the price of gas. You're going to feel a supply shock in all the fertilizer for the crops that is petroleum based now. You're going to feel it at the grocery store. You're going to feel it 6 months to a year from now. That's when the shit is going to hit the fan. And the reason we have so many guns in this country is because that kind of a crisis is why we have guns. To protect our own food and our own resources from our government and from the ineptitude of our government. At the end of the day, you're going to have the government using the crisis that is created here in order to justify an expansion of its own power. Yeah, they're already trying to make a hantavirus pandemic happen. And of course, the internet is ablaze with hantavirus, like respiratory issues, and the COVID vaccines is one of the potential side effects. I don't know if that's valid or not. The sad part is I can't automatically rule it out because you can't really trust your government or your business in this country. They're all fucking evil. And that's why there are more guns than people in this country. It's not because we want to have a bunch of guns to kill each other. It's because we feel like we need guns to deal with what the government's going to do. Because the government is batshit crazy. I mean, $39 trillion in debt. Like, that's just at the federal level. That doesn't count state and local debt. Um, and what'd you get for your 39 trillion? What'd you get? Did you get health care? Did you get world class infrastructure? Did you get a world class educational system? What did you get for that $39 trillion in debt that they ran up in our names on our full faith and credit? What did we get? I'll tell you what I've perceived that we got. We got the global war on terror. Um, we got all the shit with the Arab Spring during the Obama administration. We got Fast and Furious, where they were shipping guns over the border to the Mexican cartels and under the guise of like tracking those guns, which were then used to kill civilians. Um, then you got COVID. Like that's what you got for that $39 trillion. And if you're an unethical shitheel who was amoral enough to take one of those Paycheck Protection Act loans or any of those quote unquote stimulus checks, I got news for you. They didn't have the money to do that, and the reason everything is so expensive now is because of assholes like you taking what you viewed as free money, but money is never free. Like, inflation is real. And a lot of Americans are seeing that across all aspects of their life. It did not have to be like this. But it was because our government is the problem. Like, governments are established among men to secure our liberties and all this other stuff. Um, but is your government securing your liberty? I mean, we've got John Kerry on camera talking about how the First Amendment is a problem because it enables what he describes as disinformation. And the reason John Kerry is concerned about it is because the average American consumer or the average American citizen doesn't know the difference between information and disinformation. Well, how do you think that they got there? How do you think you got a population that fucking stupid? It's by design. Our schools don't educate our children to think critically or independently or to have a good grounding in science and mathematics. They don't teach kids how to write a complete sentence or a proper paragraph. And all of those things come with the ability to articulate your feelings and in a healthy, constructive manner. But they don't teach them that. They teach them it's okay to be gay, love is love, black lives matter, all this other nonsense, so that they can learn that actual decency is just a slogan. Actual human empathy is basically just changing your Facebook banner or profile picture. That's all it's been distilled down to. But if you say certain words, you're just a terrible human being. You know, if you say nigger or fag or anything else, you're just the world's worst human. That's the level that we've gotten to in this country, the level of fucking stupidity. You don't have to call anybody any of those names. You just have to say them. Because now there's like a group identity license on certain words. Certain groups have claimed ownership of certain words or the ability to regulate speech for everybody else as it pertains to those words. And I think we all know how I feel about that. Um, and I think a lot of Americans feel that way. Uh, I think a lot of us are a little bit past fed up with our government at the moment. I don't have anything against the people of Iran. I think their government is just as bad as ours, quite frankly. And I think the reason their government killed 40,000 of them for protesting is because it could. They don't have more guns than people in Iran. And so the vast majority of those people out in the street, they were unarmed. They had no way to really fight back or defend themselves. And so 40,000 of them got killed. Our government looks at that and covets it. They wish they had the means to do what the Iranian government did to the Iranian people in their recent protest. And that's why we have guns. That's because ultimately we're betting that when they do eventually try to come after us, or they try some shit, they're going to fuck around, they're going to find out. It's going to be a bloodbath. Like, there's no way around it. But the great satisfaction is, even if you lose in that situation, the average American, their attitude is, at least I'll take as many of those sons of bitches with me on the way out as I possibly can. Like, that's the grim reality of how we feel about our government, about our criminal justice apparatus, about our government at all level. Institutionally, policy-wise, in every way. Like, they're present, I guess, to do something other than fuck us out of our money and our future. Like, they're there to do something besides set us at each other's throats based on stupid shit like skin color or ethnicity or whatever. The average white person doesn't wake up in the morning and think they're automatically better than anybody else. So the average black person doesn't wake up and think that. There's a select group within each ethnicity that wakes up and thinks that way. They're racially conscious to the point of being neurotic. And they believe in group identity, in identity politics, and they want to subjugate everyone else to their benefit. They want to subordinate everything to their benefit. Whether they're white, they're black, they're brown, Asian, whatever the case may be. They're just assholes. And for a long time, assholes were marginalized. They were at the fringes. Nobody paid attention to them. They made a bunch of noise, but nobody paid attention to them. Nobody listened to them, and certainly nobody took their suggestions about anything. And now, those kinds of freaks are in the mainstream. And the rest of us have to walk around on eggshells, or broken glass, more accurately, around those fucking people. That's what it is. So, when you ask why we have guns, it's because our government is increasingly seized by these unbright racial neurotics, as William F. Buckley would have called them. And our government is deployed against the rest of us who really don't give a shit. Like, if you really get down to brass tacks, if I don't agree with something, I don't do it in my own life. Like, if I don't think it's okay to be gay, well, I don't have sex with men. I basically, you know what I believe by how I live my life. You know what my morals are by how I live my life. And I believe in free markets for morality and economics. I believe actions have consequences, which is why I don't do a lot of things. I don't drink alcoholic beer. I drink non-alcoholic beer because it's just not conducive to me living my optimum life. It's that simple. I don't do drugs anymore because, I had a kid. And I've got to be responsible for everything in that kid's life and how she turns out. She's going to be pissed at me. Her mother and I got divorced. And so she'll carry that angst and resentment around for a good portion of her life. Um, that's life. You know, she's my kid, and I'll always owe her something. She didn't choose to come here. Her mother and I brought her here. Um, so at the end of the day, you know what my values are based on the fact that I support my kid, and I do try to do right by her no matter what the situation. You know what my values and morals are by how I treat my wife. My wife, she's a stay-at-home. I don't believe you should put financial stress on women. I think it's a recipe for disaster. But I do think men are built for that kind of stress. That's our element. And my wife is perfectly feminine and happy being at home, taking care of the house, cooking, cleaning. Plus, I mean, she helps run a nonprofit. So she does have some work, but she gets to stay at home in her comfort zone and do things. And you know what my values or morals are by the fact that I treat her like a woman. I try to fulfill the biblical mandate for marriage, which is Christ. He gives himself for the church, and a husband's supposed to give himself for his wife and his family the same way that Christ gave himself for the church. So I do try to do that. You know what? I don't have any issues with my wife disrespecting me, because all I make it rain paid bills. All right, I don't have stupid habits. So you know what my morals and values are in America. The issue is there are a lot of people who preach a sermon, but if I want a sermon, I'll go to church on Sunday. I don't need it at school. I don't need it at work with all this talk of diversity, equity, and inclusion and workplace culture and all this other crock of shit. The vast majority of us don't need instructions on how to talk to each other, how to treat each other. We work with each other, black, white, brown, whatever. None of that polarization or identity politics is sufficient to justify us being dicks to each other. But that's what the government is pushing. And again, that's why we have guns, because they're trying to create a powder keg in this country. All this shit with the Epstein files and everything else, they're deliberately trying to provoke us. Like this business with like the price of gas going to $5 or more. I've seen reports of diesel prices approaching almost $8 a gallon. And if you don't think that that's going to be passed along to you in terms of the price of milk, bread, and eggs, you're out of your mind. It's coming. And they're trying to provoke us. So they think that they're going to have a justification for coming after gun owners or for coming after more of your civil liberties than they already have. They're going to try to get more, because these crises, the solution is always more government power, rather than an examination of how government power played a role in the crisis in the first place. Turns out, U.S. taxpayer dollars were being funded to weaponize the coronavirus. Who fucking knew? I mean, Obama had signed an executive order banning gain-of-function research during his tenure, all the way to like 2017, and that executive order was still in place, and they're still using your tax dollars to weaponize coronavirus through the Wuhan Institute of Virology, I believe it was, in Wuhan, China. And they were doing it illegally. And it's not gain-of-function research, it's bioweapons research, which is fucking illegal under international law. But instead of calling it bioweapons research, they call it gain of function research. I watched my government kill millions of people with that bullshit, which they use my money to do. And then the solution that they rolled out in those mRNA therapies, they got at least 5.5 billion people around the world to take at least one dose of those damn things. And turns out those mRNA therapies weren't vaccines at all. They didn't stop the transmission of the drug. They didn't do any of that shit. Like, they didn't work as advertised. And so suddenly it's somehow the metrics kept changing in terms of what the success was. They said it was going to stop the spread of the virus. It didn't. You could still contract coronavirus. Still track COVID. You could still contract it. You could still catch it. Then it was, well, if you have this, like mRNA therapy in you, it'll lessen the severity of the symptoms. For those of us who had coronavirus, it was like a really bad flu. It lasted a week or two. And for the elderly or the chronically ill or morbidly obese, well, guess what? It was worse for you. But you were already sick. Like, there are old people who die from the flu every year. Like just the regular flu. So it wasn't as much of a crisis as they were making it out to be, but they were using it for a power grab. They kept us all in our houses. I remember being present around my niece, her junior year of high school, which she basically lost to COVID. Her and a lot of people in her generation lost an entire year of school, an entire year of socialization, and they became more hooked and more addicted to their electronic devices as a means of connection and communication. That's a direct result of our government funding gain of function research into COVID. They're trying to weaponize bat viruses. And that's why we have fucking guns. Because they do dumb shit like that. Like, why would you do that? Why would you illegally take our taxpayer dollars and try to make a virus worse? Why would you do that? They sit there and say it's gain of function. Oh, we're trying to anticipate how these viruses evolve and get out in front of them before they do. No, you're not. You unleashed a bioweapon on the entire world. Millions died as a result of it, and then millions more are dying and continue to die as a result of the vaccines you rolled out. And now you have parents who don't want to vaccinate their kids at all. So, good job, American public health establishment. Fucking aces. So, when I talk to foreigners about why Americans have so many guns, like, this is roughly what I articulate is, if you had our government, wouldn't you want guns? Like, look at what our government is capable of. Look at what it's been capable of throughout its history. Like, there was advance notice of Pearl Harbor. It's just that Washington, D.C. didn't give those naval officers in Hawaii that information, that intelligence that they were about to be attacked. And so when it came to Pearl Harbor, our Navy were sitting ducks. The same thing happened in the Gulf of Tonkin. That entire thing, our guys were never fired on by the Viet Cong. So when Lyndon Johnson goes before Congress and he says, our boys are floating in the water, that's the biggest crock of shit ever. It was a false flag. Like, at the end of the day, 50,000 Americans died in Vietnam over that. 9/11, I remember sitting in my living room and my roommate got up. I was like 23 that year. So I still had a roommate. And I remember both of us just watching the news reports of what was going on that morning. And just this sort of anger or sadness that somebody could do that to those people. They just went to work and got burned alive and pulverized to dust. Because somebody in our government failed to keep, 19 sand diggers with box cutters from overtaking 4 airliners. Like, I'm sorry, even back then, you still had to go through metal detectors at airports. So the idea that those guys got box cutters on those jetliners is insane to me. But that's the official story. That's what happened. And I refuse to call them Arabs. Any sack of shit that kills over 3,000 people, or any group, collective of sacks of shit who do that. If I use racial epithets toward you, well, tough shit. I'm not saying it about any Arab who doesn't support terrorism or who just wants to worship Muhammad or Allah or whatever it is that they do. As long as they abide by local laws and customs in the United States, don't have any issue with you. But I do have a problem with people who support terrorism, white, black, brown. The fun thing about terrorist groups is that they never go after military targets so much. They go after civilians because they're bitches. Like, that's who they target because they're trying to create like a popular uprising in their target population, like dissatisfaction. But in 9/11, like, what happened? Anybody get fired for what happened on 9/11? Anybody get demoted? Anybody get a written or verbal reprimand? Because I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of any Americans being held accountable for 9/11, even though we had the world's most expensive military by far, even back then. What the hell happened? Like, somebody failed. Somebody fucked up. You got 3,000 dead Americans. You got 4 downed airliners as a result of it. I expect Osama bin Laden to be Osama bin Laden. He's an Islamic fundamentalist piece of shit who killed 3,000 people who were just going to work. I expect that of him. I also expect the government that I pay my hard-earned money to keep myself and my countrymen from dying as a result of that clown show that happened on the morning of 9/11. That 19 sand niggers were able to hijack 4 airliners with box cutters because they bypassed airport security somehow. And like I said, if you're offended by my language, I refuse to call those men Arabs. I wouldn't even call them Muslims. I've known a lot of Muslims. I obviously do not agree with what they believe or think that it's true, or I would be Muslim. But I've had no issue with the vast majority of Muslims I've met. decent enough people. Sold me beer at gas stations. I know it's haram for them, but not for me. Especially not back then. Now my beer is non-alcoholic. Again, shout out to PBR for making a non-alcoholic beer. $10 for a 12er. That's a good value in this economy. No, I mean, when I look at just the vicarious offense in this country now, Arabs will hear what I'm saying, Muslims will hear what I'm saying, and they'll take it with a grain of salt. It's white, upper class women who have the luxury of being offended on behalf of others all the fucking time. Some of them figured out a way to monetize it. They have podcasts and Instagram profiles and shit like that on social media, and they're constantly, look at how tolerant I am. Look at how, open and inclusive, or whatever the latest word of the day is. But they'll be all offended and butthurt that I said sand nigger on a live stream referring to terrorist. Not referring to an entire region of people, just a bunch of assholes who killed a bunch of people. Like, that's the reality of this situation. I think when somebody is an asshole and they do harmful, physically violent stuff to other people, they kind of forfeit any claim to respect. They deserve whatever name you call them. If you're out here killing people, raping people, or advocating or espousing for that, just law-abiding, normal people you happen to disagree with, you're a sack of shit. And I don't like you. And I'm perfectly fine saying that. And depending on what color or background sack of shit you are, I might use a few epithets to refer to you as an individual asshole, to convey the depth of my disdain and disrespect for you. And I think in a free society, we should be able to do that. And we used to have guns for our government, but our government isn't necessarily censoring us as much as we might have anticipated. They have figured out how to outsource that. So as I said, upper class white women and the internet, like cancel culture. So ultimately, they're going to try to make you a celebrity for, using language that they don't agree with, or using terms that they don't agree with. And of course, all these pathetic white people who, they want to sit there and say, oh, well, they can say it. Well, you can say it too. You can, I've said it. Nothing's happened to me. Nothing. Like this old notion that if you use certain language or whatever, you're automatically a bigot or a terrible human being, or that's what you harbor in your heart towards an entire group of people. It's the biggest crock of shit. I mean, I don't like a lot of white people. Honkies and crackers. I understand why black people use derogatory terms towards a certain class of white people, because I don't like them either. I don't like the way they act. I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they smell. I don't like the way that they are. They're trash. They're white trash. And they behave like it. And they deserve every terrible thing that is said about them. Because it's true. we've come to a point in our society where telling the truth is mean. Um, Telling the truth is like one of the more loving things that you can do for somebody, even though it might occasionally be awkward or even hurtful. But the government's made it impossible to do that. Um, Through externalizing speech policing to private parties such as corporations, and of course, drumming up and creating a culture that revolves around cancellation as long as individuals can get enough of a mob together to go digitally lynch somebody, they feel like, oh, that's its own moral affirmation. I'm going to crack open my second PBR of the podcast. This is actually quite good for what it is. Um, it's actually a pretty good non-alcoholic beer. It tastes like PBR. The good staple summer cheap drink that I remember. Never could go wrong with a good PBR on a hot summer day, like when you're out helping your friend change his starter or like fix his lawnmower or whatever. Back in the days when I was healthy enough to do things like that, um, there was nothing like killing off a few PBRs afterwards. Good times. I remember my youth. And for those of you who are young, enjoy being young while it lasts, because eventually um, age does happen. And age sucks. But as I was saying, the government has externalized speech policing to private citizens who have kind of self-appointed them the arbiters for what's moral and politically correct and good for the rest of us. And they get enough of a mob together to go digitally lynch somebody. And a lot of us, we self-censor because that's the design here. There's your stochastic terrorism. It's telling people what they can and can't say. And you can say whatever you want. You just have to deal with the consequences of it. Now, the consequences are you might get the taste slapped out of your mouth. But I don't believe that the consequence of free speech should be that you should lose your livelihood. Even if you say something that I find heinous, I think you should still be able to earn a living. And I think associating someone's employer or client with their opinion is absolute horseshit. There are a lot of things that people I've worked for over the years profess that I don't agree with at all. There's a lot of things that I profess that a lot of people don't agree with at all, that have paid me money, have associated with me professionally and whatnot. And at no point should you, a reasonable person would not think at that point, oh, just because he did some work for this guy 10 years ago, this guy must agree with him. Like, a lot of people that I've associated with over the years are very aware of how different our opinions and outlooks are. They're still friends with me because they're fucking mammals. They're rational adults. They know how to do that thing called agree to disagree. That's the reality of America. Is now you need guns, not just for your government, but for these fanatics who think, oh, he's a transphobe, he's a homophobe, he's this, he's that. Like, I miss 90s fags so much before that entire community became a bunch of sensitive penises about everything. Like, if you looked at the group of friends that I hung out with in my 20s and 30s, they were a mix of gay and straight and bi and trans, like, but they were all tough people. And I don't even think they were tough. I think they were just, they didn't allow other people to have control over their reactions, which was refreshing because I grew up in the 80s and my dad was part of what was called the moral majority. That's what they designated themselves. And they were perpetually and professionally offended by everything. Everything was a war on Christianity. Everything was a war on traditionalism. This, that, and the other. And they just never stopped bitching and complaining about every little perceived slight in the media and popular culture. And they were just insufferable to listen to because they were victims. They were professionally aggrieved all the time. And their hair was always on fire. They were running from one flashpoint issue to the next. And the good thing in the 90s was the other side wasn't like that. Like, the other side wasn't perpetually pissed off all the time and up in arms about everything. Like, the other side got mad about shit like Matthew Shepard being tied to a fence in a field and beaten to death, which is a fucking reasonable thing to be upset about. Like, you could kind of see their point. Like, they tied him down as a human being to a fence and they beat the shit out of him. It doesn't really matter to the ordinary person what the motivation was. It's just horrifying when you hear about something like that. And that entire community in the 90s is totally different than the way it is now. The way it is now reminds me of the moral majority of my childhood and how just insufferably smug and autocratic and just pissy those guys are. They're constantly the victims of everything. So much so that you now have people like Scott Wiener in California, who's a state legislator. He wanted to change the criminal penalties, and he did change the criminal penalties for same-sex oral and anal sodomy on kids. Like, that's the big champion of the gay community. For years, people who wanted to fuck kids were trying to knock on the door of the LGBTQIA movement, and I know that because back when it was just LGBT, I was there, and my gay friends did not like NAMBLA. They did not like men who went after what they call like chicken hawks or whatever. Uh, they didn't have any time for that. By and large, they looked at it like it was. It's fucking gross and inappropriate, and it should be prosecuted. So we were all of one mind about that. Like, that's why we could hang out. We did have like a basis, like a mutual value system in terms of like, hey, consent has to form the basis of sex, and children are incapable of consent. They don't cognitively understand the significance of sex, so legally they're unable to consent. Cognitively they're able to, you just shouldn't fuck kids. That used to be the norm, and people understood. Legally, that means till they turn 18, and then after, like, even socially, there's some opprobrium or disapproval towards people who like them young, all these ratty ass old men who go after 18, 19, 20-year-olds. um, ditch their wives and their kids to go after some like hot 18 to 21-year-old or whatever. There's social opprobrium for both of them, or at least there was. Like the gross old man, and of course, the gold digger sugar baby. 18 and 21 is like, no, you don't love him. He doesn't love you. It's transactional. It's prostitution by another name. Like, that was the norm in the 90s and early 2000s. And shortly after Obama got in office, that's when I think the element of that community that was fine with advocating for sex with pubescent and prepubescent children suddenly got a lot louder and a lot more emboldened. And the other side of that community was not kicking them out where they fucking belong, which is on the fringe. And the same thing with the other side. Like, I remember a guy he was like a Missouri congressional campaign, got into a lot of hot water because he talked, I think it was legitimate rape. As though there's such a thing as illegitimate rape. But he was talking about legitimate rape, and there have been a number of other Republicans who open their mouth to switch feed. Those guys hit the mainstream with the Tea Party. Well, it was cornpone, homespun. Republicans came out of the woodwork and started to say some absolutely wild shit, and they continue to say some absolutely wild shit. Just as wild or wilder than what's being said on the left wing when it comes to kids. When it comes to sexuality with kids and gender identity with kids. Like, there's a number of Republicans who are fucking freaks on that issue. A lot of them are closeted gay men. That's another sad thing to watch. Is like, why would you want to belong to a club that clearly doesn't want you? And of course, over the last 20 years, there's been a significant influx of Republicans who tried to make overtures towards gay men and women. And the reality of it is there's no overture to be made from the conservative or traditional side of things to that community. I was a good bit more liberal about it in my younger years, but after 6 funerals, 3 of them for suicides, 3 of them for disease and addiction and everything else, and just watching all of your gay friends suffer, you reach the point where you say, all right, I don't know of a single instance where it works. My gay friends back in the day were fun, but they were all hurting and unable to move past everything. And I think their sexuality was how a lot of that trauma and a lot of that pain manifested. Certainly it was for me, like as a hypersexual straight man. It worked itself out in my promiscuity, the abuse that I suffered as a kid. Because it was a way of asserting control. Like if you're a victim of childhood sexual abuse or physical abuse, like the powerlessness that you feel in that situation, especially when I became cognizant that what happened to me was sexual. That was fucking devastating. And then when I figure out how to assert autonomy and control over my own sexuality for my own purpose and my own pleasure, like I went absolutely crazy. Um, and it was a direct result of how I felt as a kid about it. And so a lot of trauma survivors assert self control or autonomy, or at least their version of it, in really self destructive ways. Um, and it's unfortunate. Every gay man that I've ever known was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. Like when you get to drinking with them and talking about it, like that's the reality. It's not their fault. Like it's absolutely not their fault that they were subjected to that. Every lesbian I've met has had pretty significant physical abuse, usually at the hands of a male in her past. Either in childhood, like a dad who was just a complete piece of shit. Some of them are sexually abused, but all of them that I've ever met have been physically abused in some way. And as a result, like, they're just turned off to men. And I don't blame them. Like, some of the stories that you hear when you talk to lesbian women about what was done to them are just unbelievably horrid. And you understand why they would never want anything to do with a man ever again after that shit. And I'll say this to the men who abuse women or children: you should fucking die. You are unfit and unqualified to be called a man. I'd call you a bitch, but that would be an insult to female dogs. And I don't ever want to disrespect them by comparing you or using a term used to denote a female dog on some piece of shit who hits women and kids or who sexually abuses others, women or children, or other men. Like, you should die. Okay, I'm fine saying that. You should die. Your victim should kill you, and if your victim can't kill you, the state should. Like, it's that simple. I don't have a lot of tolerance for abuse. And understanding the way that abuse works out in adult life for survivors of abuse, whether it's hypersexuality among opposite sex people, same sex people, um, or it's this confused gender identity nonsense, it has a significant effect. And I don't think it's any accident the explosion in autism over the last 40 years is directly linked with an explosion in gender dysphoria. I myself am autistic. I was never confused about being a boy or a girl. Um, but that's the other thing here is if you are a child who has a diagnosis of a physical or mental disorder or neurodivergence, like you're statistically more likely to be abused. If you're adopted or fostered, statistically more likely to be abused. And so what you're seeing in this explosion of autism and concomitant rise in like gender dysphoria diagnoses or people coming out as trans, a lot of it traces back to the fact that autism has exploded. And I think you need to be looking at the root causes of that. And some people, like RFK Jr., are. Now, whether or not they're ultimately going to be successful in connecting autism to basically pummeling children's immune system with a bunch of different vaccines at once, that's anybody's guess. If you look at the explosion of childhood vaccine schedule from the 80s when I was a kid to now, it's stunning. And I do think that it's causally related to cognitive and physical disorders in children. Their bodies just can't handle being inundated with all of that. But when you look at the implications for people's sexuality, people's gender identity, for their possibility that they will be abused, we should all be concerned about that. I'm not advocating to hate gay people. When you see a gay person, you should look at their parents and the authority figures in their life during their upbringing. That's where you should look. Absolutely. Because you're not born that way. Like, ultimately, there's a root cause to all of these issues. And that root cause is usually childhood trauma and abuse. Any type of adult dysfunction, that's usually what it is. Which is why childhood is so important and why qualified parents are so important. Like having a good value system in the home. Because that informs how you treat each other. It informs how you treat your kids. And what you see in this country, and the reason we have so many guns as ordinary people, is the fact that we have values and we know our government's only value is power. It's the only value it pursues. And it pursues it at the exclusion of every other concern. Like, the government views crises as an opportunity. And that is why we will always need guns. Because as bad as the crisis might be, be even worse if you weren't armed and in a position to resist the government's overreach. We all might think that the government has been quite extreme in some of its heavy-handed techniques over COVID and so on and so forth. But imagine what the government would have tried if people didn't have guns. Imagine what they would have gone for then. They would have swung for the fences. The issue here is we do have guns. And that's why every single time there's a school shooting, every single time it's a bunch of white kids at a school being shot up there trying to get people to support more gun control or the abolition of gun ownership as a rule. Make no mistake about it, they don't want you to own guns. Like, they certainly don't want you to be proficient in them or, knowledgeable about your firearms. They don't want you to know how to use them. They don't want you to own them. They don't want anything to do with that. And ultimately, it's because they want to regulate every aspect of your life. And they resent the shit out of guns because as long as there's an armed population, they're not going to be able to do that. Not without a significant cost. And the issue here is that ultimately we're going to come to a head, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. We have $39 trillion in debt and counting that our government incurred in our names. We didn't really get $39 trillion worth of shit or $39 trillion worth of benefit. but we got $39 trillion in debt. Um, that's the reality of America's situation. And of course, you have this identity politics polarization where people hate each other for no fucking reason other than the fact that that's become the cultural norm, is to have this list of resentments and grievances against each other. Like, everybody's fucking oppressed now. And no, you're not. I mean, life is actually pretty good compared to what it used to be. Um, Over half of children died between 1 and 5 in the 19th century. Numbers didn't get much better throughout the 20th. And then, of course, you had sanitation, you had antiseptics, you had all sorts of things, innovations that made life more possible and more civilized. Um, and so ultimately, it's really not that bad right now. But there are people who need it to be, and a lot of those people are the people behind our government. And they're trying to create a crisis or a flashpoint where they have a reason to confiscate your ability to defend yourself against their aggression or their ideology or their political solutions. And they want to make things. They want to legislate your speech, but really what they want to do is control your thoughts, because your thoughts give rise to your speech. So they're trying to indoctrinate your kids in the schools that you pay for, with values that you may not necessarily agree with. They're trying to get your employer to censor your speech outside of work. And they're also trying to get your employer to promote a value system at work that ultimately operates to the exclusion of other value systems. And as a result, a lot of us self-censor at work. We may resent like all the diversity, equity, and inclusion crap and workplace culture bullshit that is rammed down our throats if we do have a 9 to 5 job on site as opposed to remotely. We might disagree with it, but ultimately we have to go along with it because we got to support our families. We got to earn money. And so what the government has done is outsource like speech policing and regulation to these private entities. They're trying to direct the way that we think so that we're more careful about what we think or how we react to certain situations. Ultimately, it benefits a group of people who want to turn us into their serfs anyway. The thought police, the speech police. And the answer to all of this is more speech and more guns and more freedom. It is just a defiant posture where you look at these people who are trying to regulate every aspect of your life and get you to voluntarily cede your liberties for some greater good that is never the greater good. They're trying to get you to voluntarily give up some portion of your speech, some portion of your like financial freedom. That is, your income becomes the income of the collective through taxation, so on and so forth. There's always this greater good that they're positing to you that you're going to benefit from, but you never do. And at the end of the day, you just have less freedom and less autonomy and less ability to say what's on your mind. So most of us won't say certain words because the social conditioning is so great that we've just been taught all those words are off limits. Words like nigger, sand nigger, kraut are spick or Jew or kike or whatever. They're just words. You know, when I was a kid, you'd be taught by your parents, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me. And it's good advice to live by. Um, it's extraordinarily. You're not giving people control over your reactions or your emotions based on the words that they use or the vitriol that they hurl at you. You're exercising self control. This is a good thing to promote. But fast forward 40 years or so, and all of a sudden, it's in vogue to be offended by everything. Like, you're giving people control over your reactions when you do that. Like, you are giving other people control over who you are and how you react when you do that shit. You have no self control. You have no self discipline. And consequently, your outbursts are held up as an example of like why the rest of us can't speak freely. Because somebody might get emotional, somebody might be offended, somebody like you might provoke somebody to violence with your words. And so what? Maybe I want to provoke them to violence. Maybe that's just a time-honored human tradition of speech. Is sometimes you're trying to be offensive to somebody you don't like, somebody that you think is just a sack of shit. So fucking what? Like, I don't think. Well, I know that there are some white people who don't bifurcate between blacks and niggers or whatever. There are some white people who think it's either or. Uh, and then the funniest thing ever is if you just sit down and shut up as a white person, um, a lot of things that you might think privately will be expressed by the brown and black people around you. Because you know who hates those groups within their own demographic the most? There's no more racist person on the planet than an old black dude. Or somebody who's actually from the continent of Africa. Not an African American, an African. If you want to hear some of the most racist shit ever, sit down with one of those people. Eventually they're gonna let loose, and they're gonna put words to sentiments that you might think privately, but you don't feel confident enough to express because you're white. Same thing with brown people. Brown people hate illegal aliens more than white people ever will. Like brown people who are here legally, they hate all that shit. They're driving around in their pickup truck, which is beat up and, clearly been used to work. And they bitch endlessly about illegals coming here who drive brand new $80,000, $90,000 trucks because they don't pay taxes. So they can operate their little carpet laying business without any deductions or taxes whatsoever. And they immediately spend their money on newer trucks and everything. So these people who came here legally, who live here legally, who are in competition with that, who are following the law, they're at a disadvantage. Because they can't compete with those prices. Abiding by the law is expensive. So they hate illegals. Even though, for the conventional wisdom is, acts like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. it's a duck. And it really isn't. It's never that way. Like, this segment of the population or the demographic that acts like this, whether it's white, black, or brown, they're not representative of the entire group. I mean, you feel it if you're part of the group and you see somebody acting a fool and they look like you and they walk like you and they talk like you. They're from the group that you're in. You're embarrassed, not just for them, but for on behalf of the entire group. So it's okay to feel some embarrassment about the way somebody who looks like you acts and talks and behaves, especially when it's classless and inappropriate. It's another thing entirely to try to destroy that person's entire life. Going on the internet, forming a digital lynch mob. Like, it's entirely different at that case, or in that case. At the end of the day, got a pretty consistent, like, 4 or 5 people watching this. Anybody want to jump in the chat, ask any questions about this freewheeling, rambling diatribe? Why do we have so many guns? I think it's because our government is psychopathic, and foreigners, if they had our government, they'd want a bunch of guns too, not to kill each other, but as a deterrent to the government. We don't get any return on investment for our taxes. We just get to see CNN bombing Iran, or illegals defrauding SNAP and TANF and Medicaid. We get to see that shit. Which is another reason to have more guns, because I think at this point it's become perfectly normal to hate the government. And I think the government's the problem. So, those are my thoughts at almost 1 a.m. or a long day at the nephrologist, and I got to go back for more testing and blood work tomorrow morning, bright and early. Good times getting old. So, nothing in the chat. Just 4 people watching now. Any questions, any comments, any complaints? I collect haters as a sign of my success. Anybody have anything to contribute in the chat? The new banner is up down at the bottom. Has all of the addresses you can find my content at on Substack. And if you have any tips about ritual abuse, you can email them to me at goel@investigationsandritualabuse.com. Priority will be given to tips about abusers within the David Lee Hamlin group, the LDS Church of Satan. And of course, let's talk about anything else. You guys want to talk about anything else? What do you think about the new IRA logo that I came up with? I mean, I thought the logo was pretty tight as I came up with it. Sorry about the little burst of apathy. Stop what you're doing. Just wanted to pop that logo up there again. So, Anybody have any questions in the chat? Any suggestions? Any topics you'd like discussed? Nope. Well, then, that's disappointing. Audience interaction is key to social media success. So I've been told. Um, is my channel creeps along. Over 700 subscribers. 292 away from 1,000 subscribers, which is apparently like one of the metrics you have to hit on YouTube to monetize your channel. So if you'll hit the subscribe button, in addition to watching my content, that's much appreciated. Like the content, leave a thumbs up, all that good stuff. Nobody has liked the content. Just kind of speaks for itself. Fucking. Alright, so. You got 5 people watching now. Been on for about 80 minutes. Let's see. Showed off the new logo. Run out of steam to rant for the moment. I'm just enjoying my non-alcoholic PBR. My medication is kicking in, so if I seem a little bit loopier late at night, it's because, usually before I do these things, I take medication. And then the medication gradually kicks in over the course of the late night. And I start to get a little bit slower and sleepier. But then I go upstairs and I can't sleep. I got a lot of shit on my mind, so I get up and I write. So, the topic of tonight's live stream is, why do we have so many guns? And I say it's because our government is shitty and psychopathic, and we look at what it's doing abroad as a blueprint for what it might one day try to do to us. And therefore, we want to take as many of the bastards with us as possible. We don't want to be the next David Koresh or Randy Weaver, or whoever else they disagree with that they kill. Because, unfortunately, they do it in our names abroad in other countries, but we hate them just as much as you do. Guaranteed. Give a shit what it is. Like, hating the government has never been cooler. Can't hate them enough. All the shit with the Epstein files and everything else. Can't hate them enough. All the revelations that they're using taxpayer dollars to settle civil suits for sexual harassment in their offices. Can't hate them enough. The question isn't why we have so many guns. It's why don't we have more? And why don't you, who are watching, who currently don't own a gun, why don't you own a gun? Because there is at least a deep satisfaction that, if the government comes after you and they decide to really lean in all this globalist bullshit that they're trying to do, they try to come after you, they try to confiscate your guns, at least you will take some of them with you. At least you will take some of those bootlicking collaborators with you. Those vishy fucking pansies. You'll get to shoot a few of them on your way out. And that's a moral victory, people. Like, so why do we have so many guns? Because we all saw what happened during COVID. We saw that a lot of you would collaborate and you would snitch. So get ready for the wall, motherfucker. Like, get ready. You might win, but a lot of you are gonna lose in the process. Like my personal line is, don't come to my house. Don't bother me. Don't bother my wife. Um, I'm not gonna have any reason to bother you. But if you come to my house and you mess with my wife or my kid or my dog or whatever, there's gonna be some problems. Okay, I'm always strapped. If I'm out in public and I see you trying to rob, steal, terrorize the people, I might draw my sidearm and make a permanent decision out of your temporary situation, depending on how much you want to double down or if you just want to back off. Like, is what it is. But we have guns because people in our government are dangerous. And we're looking at what they're doing abroad right now, and we know that one day they're going to start doing that shit here. They're building the infrastructure for it with all these AI data centers and everything. They're compiling profiles of us. They already have, but now they have the technical capability to upgrade it in real time and to store that kind of information. And so, again, it's an argument to buy more guns. Because not only are they fun, but I mean, you never know who you're going to have to arm in that conflict in terms of your community members and so on and so forth. Like, you never know who's going to need a gun in that situation. So have more than just the guns you need. Like, have as many guns as you possibly can. Like, personal favorites, pistols, are Glocks. There's some people who prefer SIGs, but Glocks always work. Um, they just always. I've never had a Glock that jams or gives me any kind of problems. Glocks work constantly. Now SIG rifles are nice. Not gonna lie. Um, I don't really have an issue with the reliability of SIGs, but their rifles are nicer than their pistols, in my opinion. Um, in terms of current guns that I own, as I said earlier in this live stream, I have like 98 guns. But the ones that I currently carry with me regularly are my Glock 19, my Freedom Ordnance FX9, and a Glock 40, which was handed down from my dad. I inherited it from him. And a Glock, yeah, like a Glock 40. It's I think a Glock 27, so it's the compact version of that. But ultimately, I have guns because they're fun, and they're relaxing to me. That's the civilized version. The reality of it is, I don't trust my government, and I think they're a bunch of fucking savages. Um, Watching what they're doing abroad, which I get blamed for as an American. All of us get blamed for what the government does abroad. But watching it, and just sitting there and thinking to myself, I didn't ask him to do this. I certainly didn't approve of this use of my tax dollars for this. I think a lot of us have that feeling when we watch the news. What the fuck are you doing? Like, none of us wanted this, but because one guy wanted to be an extension of Bibi Netanyahu's personal crusade. We're at war in the Persian Gulf. We're at war with Iran. And Iran has bombed the shit out of all of our bases in the Middle East. And why not? You know? Like, I feel bad for servicemen who are put in harm's way as a result of this psychopathic, short-sighted orange bastard. I didn't vote for him in any of the 3 elections in which he ran. I'm old enough to remember what he was in the late 80s and early 90s. And I didn't like him then, and I don't like him now. That guy is one of the worst things that ever happened to the Republican Party, but also could be one of the best things, because one of the things that he exposed in 2016 was just how much Republicans sucked. Like, they absolutely, in terms of their charisma, in terms of their quick-wittedness, in terms of, like, their ability to speak extemporaneously, they sucked. Like, Jeb Bush was a decent governor down in Florida. I knew, like, his gubernatorial record was good in Florida. Probably would have translated to D.C. on a practical level, other than the fact that his family is absolutely fucking corrupt. Probably would have translated over well, but then he got hit by the tsunami that was Donald Trump. And he's never been a really charismatic politician or a funny guy or anything. He's substantive. That's what Jeb Bush is. Nobody was ever like, he never lit the room up. You know, if you ever heard him speak or whatever. Not like his brother George. And that's unfortunate for Jeb, because Jeb probably was the smarter of the two, and probably the more politically competent or well-meaning of the two. At the same time, can you really escape the fact that your family is absolutely fucking corrupt? No, you can't. So if Jeb had been elected, it would be more the same Bush family business shit. But he got hit by Donald Trump, and so did every other Republican candidate. They got destroyed. Because the one thing that Trump is really good at is talking shit. Like, that's what he's extraordinary at. And Donald Trump is, honestly, I didn't like any of the 8 years that Obama was in office, and I looked at a lot of shit that he did with alarm, especially with people I knew who were in the gun dealing business. That is, people who own gun shops, that sort of shit, like, get debanked all of a sudden out of the clear blue from banks that they'd been at, 20, 25, 30 years. All of a sudden, their bank contacts and says, oh, we're canceling your checking account, your savings account, or you got to move your money. Just basically freezing them solid out of the clear blue. That happened a lot under Obama, but nobody would talk about it publicly because they were petrified of more retaliation. And so when I saw that, it was like, need more guns, need to go to the range more, need to target practice more, so on and so forth. And then Trump got elected. And COVID was such an eye-opener for me. in terms of how Americans are just bitch waffles. Bootlicking bitch waffles. And they went along with everything. It was a fucking flu. Like, it was a bad flu, and there's old people and previously sick people. People who aren't healthy are going to die from it, and that sucks. But the thing about fat and old people is they die when they get sick because they're not healthy. Like, not a reason to shut your entire country down or put all this bullshit in place. But that was a social experiment to see how many people would go along, and quite frankly, the number of people who went along with it was and is terrifying. And that happened under Trump. All that bullshit happened under Trump. And so I'm looking at this guy who I didn't think was a Republican to begin with, and still don't think is a Republican. I think he's a big government guy. He always has been. And like I said, his only means and his only end is power, which makes him just like every other politician in D.C. Like, he wants power, he wants money, he wants all of the things that come with power. And unfortunately, all these Democrats might be right in terms of saying, oh, he's going to find some way to run for a third term. But here's the problem. Do you see any Republican or Democrat that can beat him in a straight-up election? The guy's a phenomenal campaigner. And what he has done over the course of 3 elections is expose how weak the rest of the field for both major parties is. Like, he has established that beyond all doubt. So, as I look at Trump, I sit there and say to myself, he's a damn good politician. I don't doubt that for a second. But when it comes to executing his policies, he thinks that there's going to be a certain outcome, and clearly that outcome is very different. That Operation Warp Speed shit, where they emergency use authorization to all of those drugs and all of those purported vaccines that we now know are mRNA gene therapy. His intentions were good. That's what his defenders would say. And what I would say to those defenders is there's a reason vaccines take years to get approved. And you have to go through a very stringent process, because what happened with the mRNA therapy should have never happened and would not happen. But they created a crisis. They funded gain-of-function research, or, as I call it, bioweapons research into weaponizing coronavirus. And what they came up with was COVID-19. Absolutely man-made. Absolutely human-engineered. And then they let it loose on the population because they wanted to see how many of us would go along. They wanted to see how many of us would conform and obey. A lot of us did. And the rest of us who didn't were facing calls for our imprisonment. I remember there were people who were saying we should be herded into concentration camps. In the aftermath, I haven't heard that many people from that camp saying we got it wrong and what we did was fucked up. We should have never advocated for or espoused these outcomes for people who disagree with us. Like, we were wrong. We were manipulated by our government and its owners, and those owners own the media. And so they drove home that messaging, that panic and fear porn. And again, that's Yet another reason we have so many guns. Because they are trying to foment a crisis or a situation where they'll use that as the catalyst to ask you to give up even more of your rights than you've already given up. So you've already given up the right to say certain words to certain people if you're outside of a certain demographic. But those people in that demographic, they have a license to use that word, which is just the biggest crock of shit. I'm going to say what I want to say to whoever I want to say it to. And I think if society just said collectively, hey, sometimes the only way to win the game is not to play it. I'm going to say what I want to say, do what I want to do, and if it's not a fucking violent crime, fuck off. I think ultimately all this stuff would go away if the rest of us who are just tired of it became more vocal of being tired of it and also just refused to play that stupid fucking game. Like, we refused to self censor. I'm an American. I can say and do what I want as long as it's not a violent physical crime. And you can say and do what you want. There's plenty of people who say nasty shit to me on social media and via emails and everything. And there's plenty of people that threaten me and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, do I let it affect me? No. Absolutely not. I do not give other people control over my reactions. So you can say all this shit you want to say about me or to me. I'll make fun of you, but I'm not going to be too emotionally disturbed by it. So I'm going to get another beer real quick. Because I have been wanting to unload for some time today. Really frustrating visit to a nephrologist. My blood work never has any good news. Be that as it may, the topic is, why do we have so many guns? And the reason I've been trying to drive home over this live stream is, do you see our government? See what it's doing to other people in foreign countries? You don't think that they're one day going to try to do this shit to us? I know that they are. I know they've already done it in limited fashion to people like David Koresh and his little cult. I don't agree with them. Do I think the federal government could have been smarter about how to deal with David Koresh? They could have gotten him, say, when he was in town. Yeah, I do. I think they pursued the biggest, flashiest way of doing that because they wanted to make an example out of him. And instead, they turned him into a martyr. And they killed a bunch of innocent women and children in the process by trying to go cowboy style. They did that shit to Randy Weaver over what? He had some illegal guns. Was that really worth shooting his kid and his wife? You know, you just sit there and you look at these people and you say to yourself, why would I ever fucking trust them? Nothing they've said is ever really been true. They have no credibility at all at this moment. They lie about everything. And they don't even follow the law. They break it with impunity. They just use our tax dollars to cover it up. Like these sexual harassment lawsuits involving members of Congress that were settled behind the scenes and under the table. We're finding out more and more of our congressmen are turning out to be fucking predators. They're out there, And then, of course, there's the Epstein files. I mean, what a shit show. Can you imagine what's in the files they didn't release? Given how bad the files that they felt, those are the files they felt comfortable releasing. Like, this is. It's unbelievable to me that, okay, well, after this, how much worse could it possibly fucking get? And apparently, the files that they didn't release have shit on them that's even worse, according to people like Tim Burchett and Lauren Boebert and everything. And you know what? It is impossible to say anything too bad about this class of people. It's impossible to bash them hard enough or hate them enough or disparage them enough because they are just. If you read those files and you read what those people were up to and the attitudes and sentiments that they expressed about the rest of us, they're just terrible fucking human beings. It's that simple. The average person can't wrap their mind around what's in those files. Like the absolute, I wouldn't even call it sexual. Um, I don't even know what it is, other than you just get off on the degradation and suffering of other human beings, which is why you're a fucking sexual predator. And apparently, there are a bunch of sexual predators with 9 and 10 figure net worths. Apparently, if you get a bunch of money, you just become fucking strange and perverted. Uh, Apparently, that's the norm. At least that's the picture that was painted for me when I read some of those files. What is it with rich people? Why do you become so fucking weird and off the wall? I get it to a degree. I mean, when you have that kind of money and everything that comes with it, I don't think it's possible to stay normal. But eating baby intestines abnormal or weird, like, the fuck is wrong with you? You know, the shit that's in that and the shit that was in the Podesta emails with like the DNC email leak was stunning. It's very clear what these people are up to. But because it might implicate Trump, a lot of Trump's people are fine with him not following federal law and not releasing the rest of those files and not prosecuting the people in those files for the very clear crimes that they committed against children and adults. Like, talking about torturing people and killing people. And somehow the rest of us are supposed to be okay with the fact that you're not prosecuting this. Again, that's why we have so many guns. Because you're governed by people who just look at you like ants. And they look at your kids like they're sexual chattel. Let's not forget that Jeffrey Epstein was basically selling poor girls in Palm Beach. He was taking poor girls from over that bridge, bringing them up to his mansion, and basically, hey, you're poor, you're from a broken family or a broken home, so let me pay you $200 to give me a hand job or a massage, and let me do that. You know, it's fucking. I mean, it's fucking mind-boggling. He wasn't even convicted of the crime that he committed. Like, first time around, he was convicted of solicitation. Well, that's not what he did. 14-year-old girls can't consent to sex. You raped a kid. Under the law, that's the crime you should have been convicted for. But one of the things you see in the American criminal justice system is, for whatever reason, sexual predators, not just Jeffrey Epstein, but a lot of them get one chance after another, regardless of the risk to the public. And guess what? There's no cure for pedophilia. There's no cure for raping someone. The only solution that's permanent, that fixes the issue, is execution. And short of that, lifelong incarceration. It's not that hard to know where the lines are, and the guys who want to pretend that they don't know where the lines are, usually they're telling you who they are. The guys who want to have like endless hypotheticals and discussions about the issue of consent, usually they're telling you, hey, I have a problem with the idea of consent. So, if she says no at any given point, or she doesn't really say yes directly to you, that's rape. Especially if she says no outright. Like, when you're with a woman, if she wants to keep going or not. It's not that fucking hard. Like, if she's frozen stiff like a board because you're a 250-pound man who's on top of her and she's worried about getting the shit beat out of her if she says no, she's not into it. She's not consenting. And if you keep going, you're a piece of shit. So she may not have verbally said no, but that's only because she's fucking petrified of you. You're aggressive and horny, and she's half your size. So of course she's not exactly saying no to you in that situation, in that setting. But that she's not into it. That she doesn't want it. Like, you know what's going on here. And so these men who want to pretend that they don't know, they're just stunning to me. And it's stunning to me that we even have to have the discussion. It's honestly disappointing, but also it's become less and less surprising. The more and more you see what's being normalized in society, not just in the United States, but worldwide. I mean, Gordon Brown, it came out that he was invited back into UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's cabinet this past week, and that he had apparently discouraged the Metropolitan Police in London from prosecuting rape gangs. We believe these children have made an informed choice. They basically could choose to be child prostitutes. And that's the guy who got invited back into the Labour government after they got shellacked in local elections. I mean, destroyed. And they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about the fact that it's going to cost them politically. What they give a shit about is, let's push our agenda as far as we possibly can while we still have power. And yeah, there'll be some rollbacks, but damage is done. Like, in England right now, what are they going to do? They're going to deport all those refugees. To where? And at what cost? Like, this is the thing the left understands. As long as they get them in, game's over. And so the rest of us are in this tug of war between these two competing factions. The left and the right, or this false bifurcation between them. But at the end of the day, what they both want is to appropriate the government to impose their agenda and their policies on you and your life. I don't give a shit about your individual liberties or your freedoms or anything else. Those are in the way of their power. So, welcome to reality. Welcome to why we have so many guns. Because it's not a right-left bifurcation we're fighting. Like, at the end of the day, there are people who respect the right of others to believe differently, to act differently, to live differently, as long as it isn't, violent or destructive towards others and their property, their lives and their property. As long as it isn't that, we really don't give a shit. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't feel that way. A lot of people think that an election means you get to ram your agenda down the throats of the other side for however long you can win elections. Neither party has any respect for your individual liberty or your freedom or your self-determination or your right to mind your own business. They get off on fucking with you. They get off on trolling you and antagonizing you and provoking you. And a lot of you fall for it because you're mentally retarded. It's that simple. You're stupid if you believe that either major political party gives a shit about you. If you believe that all of the minor political parties give a shit about you, no, what they care about is power over you and the ability to tell you how to live your life. That's what they care about. They care about imposing their values on you over your own if they disagree with the values that you hold as an individual. If they dislike the group that you're a part of, they think that they should be free if they win 50.1% of a vote to do whatever they want to you. And what are you going to do? If you don't have guns, not much. Like, the thing that annoys extremely political partisans or extremely partisan political people is the fact that the other side might have the ability to resist whatever it is that they're trying to do. And guns are a good way to do that. I highly encourage everyone, regardless of their political persuasion or religious belief system, go buy a gun. Learn how to use it. You're probably going to fucking need it. Because our country is losing its mind. Like, if you doubt that, look at what's going on in terms of what our government's doing in Iran, what our government has done elsewhere for decades. And then imagine that turning inward. Because eventually it is going to turn inward on a mass scale, even more so than COVID. They're going to try the shit that they try in other countries here. And so why do we have so many guns? Because of that. Like, they're going to try all that shit here. They're already trying it. They're already building the infrastructure for it. They're building these AI data centers, and they've been building this gigantic surveillance machine. And the only thing that saves you is that our government builds haystacks to find needles. Like that's what's saving you right now. That's why they don't catch every little thing that you do. That and the fact that a substantial portion of their attention is spent monitoring your porn consumption. Fucking perverts. Like, no, I mean, I used to work in content review, and the sheer volume of things that get flagged in emails and whatnot, nearly all of which are being validly flagged. Uh, the sheer volume of child sexual abuse material or criminal activity being discussed involving children or just any sort of human trafficking whatsoever, it's stunning. Um, there are a lot of people who are into this shit. And then there's the stuff, if it isn't validly flagged, if it's like a confusion between legal and illegal porn, and the fact that we even have to have this discussion, all porn should be illegal. Like, you talk about something that robs people of the ability to connect with each other. It's unproductive. It's socially stifling for the people who develop a problem with it or develop just this morbid fascination to it. Um, it's just destructive to human society. And the people who promote it know that it's destructive, and that's why they're trying to do it. They're trying to undermine society from within by getting you hooked on filth, their filth, sexual filth, so that you want to actually have sex yourself. You want to actually form human relationships, which is why a certain demographic owns the majority of porn production companies and porn websites. They wear funny hats. We all know who I'm talking about. Like, they're doing it to undermine your life and to enslave you. And the government's let them do it. I mean, the fact of the matter is, porn is just as destructive to society as any illicit drug. Like, porn is the cognitive and, I guess, stimuli equivalent of methamphetamine. And it just doesn't lead to success to be fixated or fascinated on or consume it any more than drinking too much or eating too much leads to success. Like, at the end of the day, it's a shit habit to have. And you shouldn't do it, but unfortunately, it's being marketed to people. The average age of exposure to it is 10 now, which is a fucking tragedy. Imagine a 10-year-old thinking that that's the way you interact with somebody of the opposite sex, or that's the expectation you should have for the opposite sex. And how that's going to set that 10-year-old up for failure in relationships going forward. That's why it's a problem. And of course, does our government do anything to address it? No. I mean, we have the courts saying it's free speech. And that's kind of an irony, because is it really free? Or does the cost outweigh the value? I'm generally pretty free speech, and I think, You should be able to say what you want. You should be able to express yourself. And I'm not saying you can't have every freak nasty sexual fetish you want to have with other consenting adults. I may not agree with it, which is why I'm not going to participate in it. But filming it and marketing it to other people, I think, is a little bit more than speech. I don't think sex should be commodified at all. And I think it's harmful to society. I know it's harmful to society when it is, because you know where your priorities are by how you invest your time. You know where your priorities lie. And if your time is being invested in viewing or consuming pornography, uh, it's coming at the expense of time with something or someone else. And for married men, if that's what you're spending your time, it's coming at the expense of your wife and kids, and you're a piece of shit. Like, at the end of the day, your attention is supposed to be centered on those two, like your wife and your kids. That's what a married man is. That's what a husband and father is. You don't have any time of your own. You have time for your wife and time for your kids, and of course you go to work to provide for them. But that's it. And if you're diverting that time, which is finite, it's the most finite resource any of us have. If you're diverting that time and investing it in something like pornography, again, you're a piece of shit. Like, straight up. And at the end of the day, you're not qualified to be a husband and father, and you're a miserable fucking human being. And congratulations, you're probably going to produce sons and daughters who are fucked up, all because you want to jerk off to another man on the internet, getting his groove on. So congratulations, faggot, because it's one of the gayest things you can do. Like, you'd rather spend your time watching another dude get it on the internet as opposed to spending it with your wife and kids. Well, that speaks volumes. But that's the norm now, and I don't think that's an accident either. I think the government markets degeneracy to us, or the people behind the government do, and a lot of us fall for it. Like, some of us don't. We tend to be the ones who have the guns, because we're just waiting for things to pop off. We're waiting for the government to get the balls up to try what it's doing abroad in places like Iran and Afghanistan and elsewhere. Try to do that shit here. Like, try it. We have an armed population, and the reason they can do that kind of shit abroad is because A, the population doesn't have those kinds of weapons, and B, even if they did, they wouldn't know how to use them. But in America, gun culture is so mortared in, and gun proficiency is so mortared in, that most people who have guns know how to use them. Uh, that's simple. And the government knows that. Like, you see how the police are restrained. They know where the criminals are, where the high crime areas are. But are the police really present in those areas? No, the police don't want to do that because those people are armed. Those criminals are armed. And as a result, the police tend to stay where they want safe mall patrols, and they want to drive by the little suburban neighborhoods at night. They don't want to go where the action is because they want to get shot. So they're deterred by that, and their job is to fight crime and police crime. They don't want to do all that shit. They don't want all that smoke. So the government also, conversely, because the police are the government doesn't want that smoke with law-abiding citizens who are proficient and trained. Not yet, at least, but eventually they will. They'll find some reason to have a problem with law-abiding people. They'll find some reason to criminalize legal constitutional gun ownership. And then they'll go after the guns. And, people who own guns will have a decision to make. At the end of the day, we have guns because we have a government that's psychopathic and that does things it isn't supposed to do. It's almost 2 in the morning. I'm winding down. Long day of medical shit and the implications thereof. And of course, my sister was hospitalized yesterday. So if you could keep her in your prayers, they had to do surgery on her. She seems to be in good spirits. Been a lot of things going on with her lately. But I'm going to cut the live stream at this point. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found it informative and somewhat entertaining. If you didn't, oh well. Can't please everybody. But thanks for listening, for those who did.